Okay, this is April 12th, 1985. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Mrs. Agnes Giddons in Udall, Kansas. Ma'am, where were you born?
10 miles northeast of Woodward, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
November 3rd, 1918.
1980. Who is your father?
Corbadell Alley.
A-L-L-I-E?
A-L-L-E-Y.
E-Y. And your mother?
Gladys Margaret Alley.
What was your maiden name?
Fithen.
How do you spell that?
F-I-T-H-E-N.
I-T-H-E-N. Where are your folks from?
My mother was born in Emporia, Kansas, and my father in Colorado. I'm not sure what the town was.
What kind of work your father do?
He was a rancher, farmer.
Did he have a ranch there?
Northeast of Woodward.
Okay. Did your father homestead there?
No, his father homesteaded there.
Your grandfather?
Mm-hmm.
What was his name?
Oh gosh, I can't remember. John, I think. No, that's not right.
Was that his last name was Alley?
Yeah, Alley. Oh.
Did he make the run of 93? Into the street?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah.
And my mother's parents too.
Oh.
Both grandparents.
Okay, did they both stake claims in that same area, northeast of Woodward?
Fithen's homesteaded northeast of Woodward, and Alley's homesteaded about 20 miles northeast of Woodward.
What was, you remember your mother's father's first name? Your maternal grandfather?
No, I have a record of it, but...
That's fine. As a little girl, what chores did you do on the ranch?
All of them. We had pigs and chickens and milked from 10 to 20 cows, and I didn't do too much field work.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly was chores around the house.
How big was the ranch? How many acres?
He eventually built it up to about 2,000 acres. We didn't have that to start with, but when he sold it, he had about that much.
Okay, what was the major crop that you raised on the farm?
Oh, I'd say probably 50% wheat and 50% cattle. That's a guess. That's a guess. My idea, a child's idea is, you know.
Oh yeah. What breed of cattle did you have?
Whiteface.
When did you start school?
Well, I actually started the school in Canadian, Texas when I was 6 years old. You were supposed to be 7, but it was in Amarillo. My dad was straw boss on the bridge gang there. And then we moved to where my dad lived for most of my childhood. When I was about 7, we moved northeast of Woodward.
Okay, your father's straw boss on a bridge gang.
Mm-hmm.
So what did he do?
I don't know.
Was it for the railroad?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I don't remember that much.
Okay. You go through high school?
I graduated from high school and went 1 year junior college at Woodward.
What year did you graduate from high school?
I think about 1937, wouldn't it be? 36? I'd have to figure it out.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Well,
36, 37.
that's a long ways back. I can do some figuring and figure it out. And then after I came to Kansas and remarried, then I went back to Southwestern Winfield and graduated from there with a degree in elementary education. I started teaching in 1963.
1963.
Mm-hmm.
How did the Depression in the 1930s affected the ranch?
To me, that was the happiest time of my life. I didn't know we were in a depression. We raised a lot of our things that we ate, and we had milk and plenty of milk to drink. We took the cream to town, and the eggs, that was our grocery money. Flour, sugar, coffee, we raised the rest. We never went hungry. We wore patched clothes and all, but they were always clean, and I didn't know we were in depression.
Tell me about Black Sunday, the big dust storm. That was in April of 35.
April of 35. I was in high school. We double dated. We went to this friend's house, took wet cloths and put around all the windows and the doors, and used a wet wash rag to put over our face so we could breathe.
Did that keep most of the dirt out of the house? But
No, it just, there was still a lot of dust came in, but, you know, we were trying to do something. But it was real dark and it rolled in. It seems like it came in from the southwest.
I guess most of the storms came from the southwest, didn't they?
Well, the tornado comes from the southwest, usually from southwest to northeast.
Northeast. Okay. Between high school, where did you meet your first husband?
There in Woodward. He was a Fargo boy, and he was living at the time with his grandmother there in Woodward. And
What was his name?
Olin Hutchison, OlanHutchison.
And when did you get married?
1937, I believe.
And what kind of work did he do?
Carpenter.
Carpenter.
We built our own house up on 22nd in Kansas.
So, you lived in town then after you got married in Woodward?
Yes.
Okay.
I worked from a boarding room during high school. Stayed with people for my boarding room and worked, cleaned house, cooked. While I went to high school, and I worked in the grocery store, Adams grocery store. During that time, I worked at the library, babysat, most anything.
Okay, were you just a housewife then in Woodward?
Well, no, I'm talking
Not
about
just
my.
a housewife.
I'm talking about high school days.
High school. Okay.
And then after I had gone 1 year to junior college in Woodward, then I got married.
What did you study at college there at Woodward?
It was their first trial at college, and it was sort of an extension of high school, really. And I'm not sure how long it lasted. They don't have a program like that now. But the high school teachers taught the courses that I took.
And then, were you a housewife after you married then in Woodward?
Yeah, for a long time, and then eventually I started working at the Oasis Steakhouse as a waitress.
Okay, when did you start working at the Oasis?
I don't know. I probably worked there about 2 years before the storm.
Was there any warning that storm was coming?
Not really. As a child, my mother always took us to the cellar on the farm, and I was a little bit scared of storms, but not all that much. Although I felt real weird that night. It just seemed like things weren't quite right. It was kind of the beginning of spring. People wanted to be out and doing things and all, and I remember this cloud bank in the southwest about sundown, and lightning and such, and I thought, well, it's going to rain, and maybe the weather will get settled and so on. And then, of course, after dark, why it began to build up and move toward town.
Now there's a telephone strike going on.
Yes.
How long have they been on strike?
I don't remember.
Or what was the reason for the strike? Or
I don't know that either.
more money, more wages?
I suppose. But my husband always came over to the Oasis and got a cup of coffee, and usually the two little boys, they would get a drink of some kind, pop, and he would talk for a little while and then go back home and put them to bed. See, I went to work at 6 in the evening and worked till midnight. Of course, he worked in the daytime. Well, that way we didn't have babysitting problem. And he didn't come over that evening for some reason. I don't know why. He always came over, but not that evening. Well, I wanted to call him and even tried to call him, but the operator said, no, not unless it's emergency. I said, this is an emergency. I want to get through. I want to find out why he didn't come over. She wouldn't accept the call. And so I sort of started walking the floor and became restless, and I had orders build up, and the boss was telling me to get the orders out and this and that. I even went outside and walked up and down the outside step there and looked at the weather, and I wanted to even go home. We just lived about 2 blocks from there, and I thought, do I dare take off work and just go home and find out why they haven't come over? And then finally I thought, oh well, this is foolish, I better get back and get to work. And it wasn't long after that till things started happening.
What did the sky look like?
I don't remember. I was in the building quite a little while before the storm, got that close. Because then I got involved in taking steaks back in the dining room and so on, and then the first thing I knew, tin started coming off of the Oasis, and windows, bulging and cracking and popping and so on, and then it wasn't long till dishes started coming off the shelves and the whole building came apart. People were screaming, and different ones helped me and do this and do that, I grabbed a hold of the north door because it kept opening and closing. I don't know why I thought I could keep it closed, but anyway, I walked over and was trying to hold it shut, and about that time the whole building exploded, and I went out the door and all, and then I started grabbing for things, and grabbed a telephone pole, and that's where I was when the whole thing happened. I remember being, jostled around like that. There was a great big hole around the telephone pole.
How far from the door to the telephone pole?
30 feet, 40, maybe. I'm not sure. It's been so long.
Yeah. Did you know what it was when it hit?
Oh, yeah. Oh, the tornado?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I knew it was.
What was your first reaction?
My family. As soon as the wind died down, I headed toward home to see where they were, and but I couldn't go very fast because I couldn't see. It was just darker than the inside of the cave, and I would go a ways, kind of feel my way. I was afraid to get into the telephone or the electric wires and such, and I always cut across through a neighbor's driveway, and that's where I was headed, and I was groping along, and I felt bare flesh, and I said, "Who's this?" And he told me his name. He was my neighbor, and he was found later dead. The storm had stripped all his clothes off. He was crawling around on his hands and knees whenever I found him. And when he told me his name, I said, "Oh," and then I went on because the feeling was, well, I'll probably find my family in the same predicament.
How long did it take the storm to pass?
Oh, I would say no more than 5 minutes, probably. This first burst, whenever the dishes and all, it was, but the main part of it, when it just really bore down, well, it didn't take very long at all. The first part of the wind that would just maybe knock out windows and tear off pieces of roof and so on, that preceded the real force. But whenever it was really down on the ground and all, I remember my flesh. You know how your flesh will do when you stick your hand out of the car and it'll just move your flesh. Well, that's the way it did on my face. I had no control of, I was aware that it was just blowing my flesh every which way. I couldn't hold my mouth shut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. This intense pressure. I don't know how much pressure they said per square inch at the time of the tornado, but the barometer went down real low that night. And then it was just as quickly, it was gone.
How long did it take you to get to your house?
Probably 10 minutes or more, because the only time I could see is during the flash of lightning. And when I got to my house, the house was gone. Of course, I expected that. And the flashes of lightning, I could see the wheat or grass or anything, debris or whatever, was headed northeast. I didn't know that much about tornadoes at the time. So I thought, well, I've got to reason. I've got to, start looking as to how I could find them. And it all was headed toward the northeast, and so I reasoned, they've got to be northeast of where the house was. So I found them about a block away in the greater ditch, all three of them. And I would say my husband was probably already dead, because all I could hear was the death gurgle in his throat. And then the little boy was unconscious, and then my oldest boy that lived through it, he was crying that he was hurt, and please help me, Mom. And I remember climbing through this fence, barbed wire fence, and into a field, and got a mattress and put it on my back and ran over where they were, and then put them all three together and put this mattress over the top of them, because it began to rain. It was cold, wet rain. Covered them up with the mattress, and then I walked about a half a block, because the people were beginning to start hunting for people. And I could see this car coming toward my direction. And I asked them to help me, and they said they would. They were looking for other relatives. But they said, they would help me. So I ran back to where my family was and got the two kids. One was about 5 and the other one was 8. And picked one up in each arm and back to the car, and the two fellows carried my husband to the car. And then we went to the hospital. Of course, it was bulging at the seams. And so we took them to a nearby house across the street from the hospital. And the little boy died there. Of course, the doctor said that my husband was already dead, so they loaded him in the back of the pickup. And then a little later, the pickup came back. And in the meantime, I had stripped the little boy of his wet clothing, and I wrapped this blanket around him that somebody had given me. And then when he passed away, the truck came back, and I picked the little boy up and took him out and put him in the back of the pickup. And someone asked for the blanket. And I says, I says, the blanket's going to stay. You're not going to take the blanket. He said, that it wouldn't do him any good. And I says, I know it won't. I said, I'll pay you for the damn blanket. I said, the blanket stays. And so then they drove off with the bodies bouncing around in the back of the pickup. I remember counting them about, and I don't know now how many there were, but I remember counting them, and I thought, that's stupid that I would count them. But for some reason I did. But they were just pitched in there like cattle or whatever.
Where were they taken?
To Stretcher Mortuary there in Woodward.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do then?
I stayed with my oldest boy. He was awake. He would sort of fade out, and then he would come to again. And later in the night, I don't know just when, I don't remember how we got there, but anyway, we wound up at the Moreland Hospital. I suppose someone took us by car. We went to the Moreland Hospital, and then the doctors was kind of concerned about the boy because he kept kind of blacking out and then coming to and thought he had a head concussion. But anyway, by daylight, or shortly after, and I don't even remember what time of day. Anyway, he was taken to a big plane, but I think that it landed south of Moreland. Now, it could have been at the Army base west of Woodward, I'm not sure. But anyway, he was put on the plane and taken to Oklahoma City. And when we went down there to see him, I had no idea what hospital he was taken to. And we checked at every hospital before we finally found out where he was. He was down there for about 2 weeks.
Where was he? What hospital?
Children's hospitals, I believe. I'm not sure. But he had a leg infection and a cut on his back and several other, all those wounds that you get in a tornado, they take forever to heal. They fester up and they just, they just won't heal. But anyway, made it out of there. And then when he got well and the Oasis was beginning to build back, the Red Cross came in and built me a house back. And I gathered up what was left of my house and built a little two-room house on the back of my lot by myself, or mostly by myself, and later rented it out to an old elderly lady. And my son and I lived there at the house then, and I went back to work. And then I remarried rather soon because it seemed like that all I wanted was my family back again. And I guess that's the reason I married so soon, is I thought that's what I was getting. And had 4 more children. We eventually wound up in Washington, D.C., and was there for about 3 years, then came back to Woodward for about a year, and then back, and then up to Kansas, and been here ever since.
So what's your husband's name now?
Well, he's dead now.
He's dead.
Yeah, Todd Giddens.
Todd Giddens.
Mm-hmm.
What work did he do?
He was carpenter.
Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take Woodward to recover from that tornado?
Oh gosh, it was quite a while because there were so many houses. It was just, there was some houses in the southeast that wasn't touched. Most of the damage was in the southwest, west, and in that area. I mean, like this was the town where it come, kind of through there. But then there was a lot of houses in the other part of town was, lost part of a roof or windows or whatever.
What does the town look like the next morning? Only sure.
Well, like a war zone. I dug into some papers. Some of them are from Woodward and some of them are from Udall.
Blocks of the city were destroyed. How many were killed in that tornado?
I don't know. It had different reports. They gave out reports, it started out, here it says city's tornado death toll 89. Now I don't know whether that was the final toll or not. Because I think they started out about 59 and then it eventually kept increasing.
Then you have Jimmy Lee Hutchison And Olin Hutchinson here.
Yeah, that's my son and husband. It looked a lot like this. Of course, that's the Udall Tornado there.
Now, the tornado hit Udall in what year?
55. Yeah, 55.
55.
This is from Life magazine. That's the Udall Tornado, though. And I knew the Udall Tornado was going to hit. I was aware of it from about 4 o'clock that afternoon. And my husband said, "Oh, let's go to bed. You know, if it's going to get you, it'll get you." And I said, "I just wish that Udall had a warning system. I wish I could call everybody in Udall and tell them to get in the cellar and this and that and the other." And of course, there wasn't any way. After the Woodward Tornado, I thought, well, why hasn't the government, the city, someone set up a system whereby they have this warning system? And I wondered for years, where were the officials? Why didn't they wake up? Why didn't they have a weather bureau that would warn people and, all this thing? It's come to pass what I thought ought to have been done right after the tornado in Woodward. But it's taken them close to 40 years.
Was the Oasis completely destroyed? Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Was it pretty much in the center of the path of the tornado?
Yeah, I would say it's about dead center. And see, our house was just about 2 blocks north of there.
So everything was blown northeast. They said you found your family in a greater ditch?
Side of the road.
Okay. How far apart were they?
It doesn't seem like they were very far apart. I remember dragging them to where they would be together when I put the mattress over them, but they weren't all that far apart. It's a funny thing, though. I never once thought of, you're not supposed to move the victim and this and that and the other. That never entered my mind that night. Of course, there wouldn't have been anything I could have done about it because there wasn't any ambulance, no lights, no one available to help or anything. I would have just had to let them lay in the rain until I got help. So, of course, the 2 of them would have died anyway, I'm sure.
But they just died of massive injuries?
Yes. Yeah. They said my husband didn't have a whole bone in his body. He was so crushed. I don't know. I think what happened, the tornado, our house was solid enough, or I think it was solid enough, that the tornado lifted the whole thing up into the air and then it just exploded and then dumped them out. Because in looking at the debris afterward, like the west side of the house was such and then the east side was such and the north side and so on. So it just looked like that it had been taken up and whirled and then just exploded and just dropped everything about where they would have been in the house. So, that's my theory. I don't know what happened.
How much were you able to save out of the house?
You mean as far as furniture or anything?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing?
We had a few few pieces of clothes, but, some clothing that, gosh, you had to wash it 10 times before it looked clean. It really wasn't worth it. But we didn't know at the time. We figured that that's all that we have, and so, you do the best you can with it. But, of course, clothing and stuff was brought in later. But we didn't know that at the time that we were gathering it up. And then I gathered up some of the lumber and used it in this little 2-room house, but there wasn't anything. I might use 3 pieces of 2x4 and splice it together to get one.
Be able to save any memento photographs?
Just a few.
Just a few.
Yeah.
How wide is the path of that tornado? Any idea?
I really don't know. Didn't it say 100 blocks?
It said 100 blocks.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good size.
Well, I would say half the town, and Woodward was about a town of about 10,000 at that time.
Well, in that program on K101, the Weather Bureau estimated the fund was 1.9 miles in diameter, almost 2 miles.
1.9.
9.
Almost, yeah. That's about right then. Mm-hmm.
How many people were inside the Oasis when it hit?
It was a pretty good sized place. It had a front area with bar stools and about 6 or 7 booths, and then it had a large dining room that would seat 50, 75 people.
What's the first thing you did when the tornado hit, when everything started happening? What did you do?
Went and hung on to that front door. I remember the lady that owned it, she kept yelling to help her find the money. You know, I guess the cash register had blown off or something, and she was trying to gather the receipts and money and stuff up. And I remember thinking at the time, that's unimportant to me, you know. And I thought, well, you know, there's other things that I need to do. But I felt pretty helpless in knowing what to do. And there was a man lightning. I saw him, and I thought, well, you know, I'll go help him, because I didn't know what else to do. You know, I didn't think about getting down and covering myself or protecting myself or anything like that. It just, you know, never entered my mind.
Now, were you hurt in the tornado?
Very little. Well, I say very little. I had a black and blue spot that covered this much of me. And then one side of my face, and I don't remember which side, was all black and blue, like this much of my face. And then I had bruises all over my arm. Black and blue. They were black and blue for weeks. I mean, you know, really dark blue bruises. And I had a splinter in my ankle that had to be taken out later. And a cut on one knee. Minor, you know, no stitches or anything, but just minor. But then they got pretty infected. Really.
How did people help each other in Woodward? Was there pretty good cooperation among
Oh yeah, a lot of people were. All the people that didn't lose family members or didn't lose their house or whatever were more than helpful in any way, shape, or form.
Now, where do you stay until your house is rebuilt?
My husband's parents lived in the other part, but they had a little damage. But I stayed there.
And how long did it take for them to rebuild the house, the Red Cross?
Oh gosh. I don't remember when they built my house back. It was several months.
Now, was there a priority of who got help first, according to the Red Cross?
Well, they tried to base it on your finances and whether you had insurance or not. A lot of people didn't have insurance. We didn't have insurance. We, you know, at that time we didn't exactly believe in insurance. And another thing, we couldn't afford it. And I guess they based it on the need. You went down and applied and you know, told them your finances and circumstances and so on, and then they helped according to that. And they built back. The house we had was a 3-bedroom, but they didn't build that back. They just built a 2-bedroom, very much smaller house than that. But It was adequate for my son and I.
And that was, did they feel a free?
Uh-huh.
I understand the government sent some people in there to, I guess, to help out, whatever. And how long did they stay there? Do you have any idea?
No, quite a long time, because it took quite a little while to get things together. Since it was such a big tornado and everything, I think that for a lot of people this was their first experience, and they weren't all that organized and everything. And there's a lot of things that you aren't aware of that needs to be taken care of, and so on. Just like they were here in Udall, a lot of things. Well, when the tornado hit in Udall, I wanted to go. They set up a building. Some people from Wichita came down and set up a temporary building, just like a day or two, for kind of a city building for people to work out of. And I wanted to go down, and since I wasn't injured to speak of in the Udall tornado, I wanted to go down and say, well, now you ought to do this and this and this, so that you won't have what happened in Woodward. Of course, I knew they wouldn't listen to me, but first of all, I would have suggested that they have a central place for everyone to report to, so that if anyone called in and wanted to know if their family was all right and so on, they would give them the right information. My parents lived in Nebraska at the time of the Udall tornado, and they called down here, and they couldn't get any word for anything. They didn't know where I was or anything. No one had any record of me, that I was all right or if we were killed or what. And so finally my folks wound up coming down here to see. They had my oldest son that went through the Woodward tornado. They had him listed as dead for a long time, because they didn't know where he was. I knew where he was, but they didn't. And such things as that, and I wanted to go down and tell them, remedy these things so that you won't have all this mass confusion. But I never said anything, so they kind of, worked it out themselves. But that's the inconvenience of a lot of people.
What else would you have done?
You mean in the Udall tornado?
Yeah.
Well, I think there was some inequities here as far as the Red Cross building back. I don't think that they took the time to look into people's finances as much as they should have, and I felt there were some families that got a house built back that, they had other properties, and yet they got a house built back, and I didn't think that was quite fair.
Now, were you living here in this house?
No, we were living up in the other end of town. We had a house built here out of block, and we were ready to move into it. And the night of the tornado here, my husband came up here to work on it, and we had it about ready to move into. We were going to move in June the 2nd, and it blew away May the 25th. We didn't have it all finished, but my husband was putting some Celotex on the wall here, and I said, we were having a time building the house here, and I said, don't drive those nails all the way through, because it's just temporary for privacy until we can afford sheetrock, because we'd torn down an old schoolhouse and then got the Celotex out of it. And he said, no, he says, this is good enough. I says, I don't want that Celotex on the wall. And he said, it's going to stay. And I remember sitting there in the middle of the floor on a nail keg, and I said, I was patting my foot, and I said, I'll bet you that somehow, some way, that Celotex is coming off that wall. And he says, you're not going to take it off. And I says, no, but something tells me it's going to come off. Well, just a few days later, it came off. And after the Udall tornado went through, and we were all sitting there in a little huddle in the floor of the house. Of course, the house had lifted off of us and gone that way. We were sitting there in a little nest with debris all around us, and I, with a mattress over the top of us, and I laughed, and I started laughing, and everyone says, "Mom, what are you laughing about? There's no laughing matter." And I said, "You know what?" I says, "I'll bet that Celotex is off that front room up there." I think it all killed me. It was off.
Anyone in your family injured in that tornado?
No, not to speak of, really.
What did you know the tornado coming toward Woodward?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, Woodward?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know it. I knew it was storming in the southwest, but I didn't.
What did that look like?
Well, the last time I saw it just a sunset, it didn't look all that bad from my point of view, you know, because it was that far in the distance that I didn't, you know, really wasn't that concerned. But I didn't see the clouds and all within minutes of the storm, no, because I had been back in the Oasis a good hour or more before the storm really hit, so it actually built up from the last time I was out on the porch. It was lightning, and there was, you know, changes of wind and so on, but I wasn't aware that it was that close to us.
Did you have a feeling something was going to happen?
Well, I had a feeling that something wasn't right, but I didn't, like I say, at that time I wasn't that scared of tornadoes, but after that one, I can pretty well tell, you know, what's going to happen or whatever. In fact, after the Woodward Tornado, I started sleeping with my head almost in the window, and the window open. And to this day, I still do that. I cannot sleep without a window open. And it doesn't matter if it's -10 and snow blowing in. There's only 2 times that I can remember in 37 years that I've ever had to close the window. One, it was raining directly on my head, and another time it was blowing snow in. But I feel safe with my head within 6 inches of the window, because when the wind changes or anything, I can tell, and yet I can sleep sound. Otherwise, I feel hemmed in.
Did the telephone people come in?
In Woodward?
Yeah, to help out, because they were on strike.
I think they went back to work. Yeah, I think they, you know, felt that there was an emergency, and they all pitched in, and, you know, we're going to work regardless.
Did the surrounding town come in and help?
Oh, yeah.
Let me back up. I was going to ask about World War II.
Who?
World War II.
World War II?
Yeah, what did you do during the war?
You know, I just don't remember that much about World War II. I mean, I was aware that it was on and all, but my husband had gone down, I think, to Oklahoma City and taken the exam. And I think it was, I'm not sure what classification he was, but he didn't go. I think it was because he had a family, because we had 2 children at that time. And I believe, too, he was working for Armour Creamery at that time. I don't know whether, didn't they have something that if you worked in food processing is something that you...
Yeah.
I think that was one of the... Yeah.
Yeah, farmers, ranchers, any kind of food processing.
Yeah.
You were pretty well exempted.
Well, that's what he was in at that time. And so, but he passed the physical, but he was exempted because of the children and his line of work at that time. And so, World War II was kind of a distant, you know, it happens to somebody else. Just like, you know, I more or less thought. Well, I remember a tornado, I don't know whether it was Sealing, Vice, or someplace down off in there, a small tornado. But I didn't go down to see it or anything, and I thought, oh, well, you know, those things happen to other people, not me. And that's kind of the way I was prior to the Woodward tornado. I thought, well, you know, it's not going to happen to me.
But it did.
But it did, twice. And a person's chances of being in 2 tornadoes are pretty great.
Mm-hmm. And did you see this tornado approaching, the Udall tornado?
From about 4 o'clock that afternoon, I didn't want to come up here to work on the house. I said, I'm not going to go up there. I'm going to stay here close to the cellar. And I said, if it looks too bad, I said, you better get yourself home. Told my husband that. And I did several things that afternoon as though the tornado was going to happen. I put my sister-in-law's quilt in a certain place because I was quilting it for her and I didn't want to lose it. Of course I did. When we went to bed that evening, I put my daughter, well, we'd moved a little baby bed up here, and so I put her in on the divan close to where we were sleeping because we were kind of crowded down there. I was washing the dishes about 4 o'clock, and the thought went through my mind, why am I washing these dishes? They're going to blow away. Won't make any difference whether they're clean or dirty. And just, you know, just things like that all afternoon, as though I were getting ready for something. I didn't know exactly what, but...
How'd you know it was coming?
I don't know, I was just restless. Just, you know, of course it didn't happen till later that night. And then Blackwell, you know, was hit. I put the radio on the divan, and I got the house keys and the car keys and different things. And Blackwell announced over the radio that they'd had a storm there and some limb damage. And I looked right at the radio and I said, you lying so-and-sos, you know. I thought, a tornado has hit there and you're not telling it all. That's just the thought that went through my mind. And it also went through my mind, we're right in the path.
So the one that hit Blackwell is the same one that hit Udall?
Yeah, see, you can see there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just a matter of time. And at that time, the radio was so staticky, and I could hardly hear when they were broadcasting that Blackwell had hit, and little limb damage and so on, and I thought, that's not the whole story. Oh, and another thing I had done that afternoon, too, I took my son, let's see, he would have been about 15, 16, something like that. There was a fence between the neighbor and us, right by our driveway, and I took him out to this fence. And some of the steeples was out of the fence, and it was a wire fence. And the cellar was back in the back. Well, to get to the cellar, you had to go clear around to the front. And they had a wood fence in the front, and through this little gate, and then back around the house and to the cellar. But from our back door, their cellar was just across the driveway and right there. So I asked my son, I said, look at this fence. I said, if worse comes to worse, do you think that you could trunk this fence down so we could get to the cellar? And he says, yeah, I think I can. I said, well, if the time is close and we don't have time to go around the front, I said, we need to keep in mind to just out the back door and trunk that fence down and in the cellar. Now that was that afternoon. And he said, yeah, you could trunk it down. I said, okay, keep that in mind. And my husband kept saying, oh, come on to bed. I told him to take care of the 13-month-old baby. And the 2 of the boys had gone to bed, but I asked my oldest son to get him up and put a coat on. I said, I want a coat on, some kind. And one of them, my oldest boy, couldn't get the coat on the kid, and I says, break his arm or something, get the coat on him. And of course I didn't really mean, break his arm. And then my daughter, I'd put her to bed on the divan, and she had this big doll that a lady had brought that afternoon, and I had fixed the doll. It was a used doll, but I had fixed it that afternoon. And she took it to bed with her, but it was about this big. She was just 4 years old. And she took it to bed with her. Well, after the storm, am I getting off the subject too much?
No.
After the storm, why, the wall caved in on us and on my daughter. And I said, well, we've got to get this wall off of her. And, of course, we'd pull the mattress over on us. I said, well, if the windows will go out, pull the mattress over on us. So we did. Well, then the wall caved in on us and more or less buried her. So we finally got the wall off of us. How, I don't know. Because it had plaster in it and everything. It was real heavy. But I was feeling around, and I felt that doll, and it was cold. Well, I knew, it felt like cold flesh to me. And I said, oh my God, she's dead. And my oldest son said, no, I don't think so. Said, I think she's here somewhere. Well, we kept digging around and finally found her. And I grabbed her up in my arms and shook her, and I said, talk to me, talk to me. And she says, I'm dead, I'm just plain dead. And I said, say it again, girl, say it again. I didn't care what she said as long as she could talk. But we were all on the divan when the storm hit. We had gotten two little boys, and then my daughter was on the divan, and then I had the baby down here, squeezing him with my legs to keep him from getting away, and I had one little boy by the nape of the neck sticking his head down in the divan so he wouldn't get head injury. And then I was more or less on top of my daughter, had my body over the top of her. And that's where we were whenever the house was so old that the floor stayed. It was built right on the ground. The floor stayed and left us, and that's what saved us. And it just lifted the walls off the top of us and lifted our car and the piano and the Frigidaire and washing machine and everything. We just found little parts of the furniture. I mean, it wasn't a whole piece of anything. It was just where we thought we could identify it.
Anything more about the Woodward tornado that you could recall, that you remember? Does your son remember what happened?
No, I don't think so, because see, he was flown to Children's Hospital and he was down there a couple of weeks. And
I mean, when the house exploded, does he remember?
Oh no, he said that his dad got him and the little brother, the 5-year-old, in the back bedroom, and he said the only thing he remembered was his father telling him to stay right there, he'd be right back. And I don't think that my husband was aware of what was taking place. I think it came upon him so quickly. I think by that time he had decided he better get to the cellar, but it was too late. I thought at first that they might have, when I came from work and went over to where our home was and didn't find them there or anything, I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, they have gone to the show, because he had talked a little bit about that they might go. What was on at the show? Rage in Heaven, Devil on Wheels. Those were the shows that were on that night. Kind of a odd.
Ironic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, trying to think of anything else. You ever go back to Woodward?
Oh yeah. I need to go down there this summer and see my dad. He's still living. He's 90.
What's his name?
Corbett Alley.
Do you have any feelings about going back there?
No, not really. The house that the Red Cross built for me, I sold it after I came up here. Well, I rented it for a while and it didn't turn out so well. And so I sold it, and the people that bought it turned the house around and added on, so it really doesn't even look like where I live. No, I still feel like it's home as far as that goes, because I've lived in and around there quite a bit of my life. And I always speak of it as I'm going home.
Well, was there any, did you ever find out why your husband didn't come down that night?
No. I don't know.
But he came down every night and had...
I always came over and had a cup of coffee and the kids a Coke. They didn't come for that particular night for some reason, I don't know.
Did everyone survive that was in the Oasis? Anyone?
I think so. I'm pretty sure they did. I don't believe anyone was killed there. I'm not sure.
How many were killed in Woodward? Any idea?
Oh, this little clipping says 89, but I don't know whether that was the final total or not.
I've heard it was over 100, the final total.
Yeah, it could have easily been.
In fact, the whole tornado killed well over 200 people along the whole path of it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really hard to say. Funny thing, I didn't even cry at the funeral.
You did?
I said, it's beyond crying. I said, why are you crying? You know, I'd look at other people crying. Why are you crying? It's beyond crying. It's worse than crying. You know. And it wasn't for, 2 years afterwards before I could even cry. I was numb. I was a walking zombie or something. I couldn't eat for about 2 weeks. I lost about 30 pounds in about, short length of time, because I couldn't eat. Every time I'd try to eat, I would just, something in my throat would just choke me. About the only thing I could eat was, I could drink a malt once in a while. But as far as eating anything, I couldn't. The worst thing I remember was the smell. Terrible smell. You know, if you can imagine houses uprooted and the smell, then wet rain on that, all that debris, and, maybe houses that had been there for 100 years, and all the other smells. It was, I call it a death smell. It's a different smell than you've ever come across.
Now for the next few days after the tornado, what about food and everything? Food and water?
Well, I think they set up a place where people could come and get sandwiches and stuff like that. I know they did here in Udall. We lived on sandwiches for about 2 weeks.
Did the National Guard come to Woodward?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I think we have a good interview. Anything else you can think of?
No, not really. I probably can afterward.
Is there anything else that you would, if you knew a tornado was coming, or after a tornado was just hit, besides the central point, appropriate for a tornado interview, besides the central reporting point, anything else that you would do that you can think of? You mentioned the inequities in the Red Cross, and they built their houses back here.
Well, I'm sure that they did the best they could with, the information that people gave them. I don't know how you'd go about, remedying the inequities or anything. I don't suppose you could unless, at a time of disaster, it's a different set of circumstances than ordinarily. They don't have that much time. They wouldn't be able to acquire the needed information and so on. So I guess, you just take your chances. And
how long after the tornado and all the funerals?
what was it?
When would they start having funerals after the tornado? They're dead.
Well, I think some of them had them right away, and then others. Now ours was the one in Woodward. I don't remember how many days, but it seemed like it was kind of postponed because I had brothers and sisters scattered all over the United States, and it was a matter of waiting till they got there. We hadn't had a family reunion or anything. All the family hadn't been together for years and years since the kids got away from home and married and all. But that was the first time, and we all got back together, and we realized that we should have a family reunion every year because maybe next year someone else wouldn't be there, and that we should keep in touch with one another and kind of get to know our own brother or sister's kids and family and such.
So you do that now?
Yeah, we've pretty well kept that up almost every year since 47. Now, we're not going to have one this year, but we will have one next year. But most of the time we have. We've skipped a few years. But some of them they would have, I don't know how many funerals a day. And it was more or less a real quick funeral, too. Usually I think most of them were at the funeral home rather than in the church or wherever, and I think most of the funerals were attended just by the immediate family rather than, very many other people. It was sort of a blame and get over with because there's more things, other things to do, tend to the living and get a house back together and roof over your head and so on.
When did you finally, I guess, come back to your senses? Well, you said that you were numb for a while.
Well, I think the thing that held me together was the fact that there was so much work to do, and I found myself thinking about things too much. If I had an idle moment, and the only thing that would cure it would just be pick up a shovel or a hoe or whatever and get busy. And I know I've tried to work so hard so that when night came, that I didn't have any trouble falling asleep. Because I knew that if I hadn't worked as much as I could, that I had trouble going to sleep, and I didn't like that at all, because that was moments that you started thinking, and I didn't want to think. Another thing, I didn't like to be alone. I tried to, the minute I found myself alone and starting to think, then I would either get back to work or I would go where people were. And that seemed to keep my mind off of my problems. But it takes time to get over that. You think at the time that, death is forever, and you think, well, you'll never get over it, but time does ease the pain of it. Now, all throughout my life, I've had so many things happen to my family. Nothing particularly happened to me as far as, anything drastic or accident or anything. I lost a grandson in 77 in a car bicycle accident, my daughter's little boy. In 69, I lost my 21-year-old son, his wife, and 5-month-old baby in a car accident. And So it just, it seems like as the years go by, I just keep taking more of my family. Of course, I've got 4 children living out of 6.
Where's the son that went to the Woodward Tornado?
He's over by Winfield.